Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Den of Thieves, currently available on Netflix. So, right out of the gate, I was really I was really happy about this film. I'm like, okay, I'm sold. This movie had a cluster of actors, and I'm like, yeah, I thoroughly like this cast order. And so I was like, okay, let's see what this movie is. And it's a movie that's mainly focused on action, which is great. There's some technical jargon in here. I feel like this is a thief or robbery like film that is to go on and try to create something different. It's to be a it's to be a smart film that I don't quite know if I'm smart enough to go on and rattle all this off. But I feel like this movie was like such a solid good movie that I would recommend it for a lot of people going on and seeing this. Like there is some side story stuff where Nick is kind of dealing with family trouble, and we have Ensign who is to go on and have his daughter go off to like a dance or a prom, and we also have Donnie, who's to deliver the backstory of how the Merrymen got to eventually become a robbery team in this film. But so I just enjoy this movie. I wasn't 100% sold about it. Like there's bits and parts where I'm just like, okay, like there might be some eating up of time in here and parts in here, like, but it might just be like figuring out transitional stuff. So, like parts where Nick is going to like a strip club, or there's parts where like we just have like moments where people are eating out and things like that, where it's like just parts where there's not like much there, but um but anyways, really interesting kind of puzzle piecing kind of film where we're like, wait a minute, like why is this character doing this right now? And then come to find out, we're like, wait a minute, oh, there's a whole reason for that. There's a whole like puzzle piecing reason for that. I'm like, okay. We have it to our Merryman is to weirdly have all these bits of information way ahead of time, knowing full well when exactly things are to be broken down, to where we have it where Nick and a number of his people, and Nick is played by Gerard Butler here, was going on like, wait a minute, like how is it that these guys are to know this at the exact time it's to happen? And it's like, well, it must be an inside job, or it must be like intel that is just so ridiculously well that it's timed perfectly. So with that said, I yeah, definitely would recommend this film, and go ahead and check it out. Like within the first beginning of this, I was like sold. It was so good. So teeing it up, like this is like a thief robbery film, but they end up stealing like weird things to eventually get to a grander payout, which of course is the Federal Reserve. And so we have the beginning of this that they go on and they're robbing this armored car, and we're like, okay, why? But then we go on and they're going into a bank to not just rob the bank, and they're stalling within this bank, and that is to also seem very unusual for these robbers, or for these theft like people, and come to find out there's a whole reason for that. And then we have them do all this like big massive plan that is to be like perfectly timed out and have all these like certain elements in it, and is to have all of these guys go on and say, it's like, well, hey, like next time, like you should probably do this way. because like obviously you guys don't know what you're doing. And it's like, sure, yeah, like we don't know what we're doing. We're gonna steal a load of money from you, but yeah, we have no clue what we're doing. So, so yeah, and then Nick eventually at the end of the film is getting this like big reveal, and he's like, oh. It's like, wait a minute, what? Like the rug was pulled from under me. I figured it. I put pieces together, and so yeah, so because Donnie is to be given this story that he never really knew these people to Nick, and is to go on and say it's like, well, hey, I'm just the wheelman and everything like that, and come to find out, towards the end of the movie, we get this big reveal, and I'm like, oh my god, this movie is so smart, and gotta give him credit for that. So let's give him credit and go into spoilers because I can just continue to rattle off and just say that this is a smart film. So with that said, I think it's about that time to just go into these spoilers. Hopefully, I can rattle all this stuff off. If not, then I'm going to try to do all of this the best that I can. Because, man, it's about time to just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time we can do spoil this movie, Den of Thieves. So, in the beginning of this movie, we mentioned that in Los Angeles that there is to be a mass number of robberies that are to happen in Los Angeles to make it the robbery capital of the world. The mathematical breakdown of it is to eventually at some point just say that there are 9 robberies that possibly happen every day. And so we have within this story some armored car going on to get coffee, and we have Merriman and Ensign's crew here with these gas masks and bulletproof vests, like very military approach to this. And so we have this group that goes on and is to hold up these guys going to coffee. And so we have it where one guy is still in the truck and they're wanting to get this guy out of the truck, but he will not like want to just give up the truck. So they plan it to where they have this device that is to break this window, and all of a sudden we have a guy named Bo or Bosco, who is to see some guy's cup drop, and because of that, the guard is just like, well, like since my cup is already dropped anyways, maybe I should just grab for my gun. And Bosco ends up shooting one of the armored car men, who's holding coffee, and so that leads to all these police officers making their way there, to where now they have to kind of defend from all these cops, and man, are these cars getting pelted with bullets. And we have it to where a guy named Rhodes who is to get killed here, and Merriman is like scrambling around going like, what the heck happened? And it's like, oh, hey, like Bosco opened fire, and he's like, god dang it. And so because they didn't want to kill anybody. So after they go on and steal this armored car, and they're right around an airport, and so we have it where Merriman is telling Donnie here to hold to this tunnel and is to hug to the airport, because so that way there isn't a helicopter to be seen here. Like they perfectly planned all of this out. Like they picked the perfect area, they picked everything to a T. So we have the armored car getaway, and we have Merriman that is still ticked at Bosco and is wanting to check this guy's gun for misfires and stuff like that. And Bosco's like, what? What do you want from me? So, because this guy, Merriman, is just ticked. But so they end up getting this armored car, and now they're gonna have to go on and like repaint it and do all these things because there's another plan with this armored car. So the whole theft was just to get this armored car. Like it wasn't the money, it was the armored car. So, and they end up figuring out a way to like get rid of the low jack and everything out of it, so that way it's not really uh, to get GPSed or whatever. So Merriman is to go on to this task and hope that Major Crimes isn't eventually going to get involved with what they're doing, because eventually when someone is to get killed, Major Crimes is to possibly get involved. So we have, of course, where Big Nick uh, O'Brien, who is Gerard Butler, is to be the Major Crimes like head detective guy, and he has a group of men behind him that we see here. And so Nick is to get called off to do this case, and is to eventually meet up with a number of guys and try to figure out this whole case, and is to meet up consistently with Lob and Bob, and they like trade like, hey man, like your clothes looks great. Oh no, my clothes look great. Oh yeah, yeah. Like, and so they're going on and like just like instead of like crapping on one another and like, or there might be some kind of just hidden like crap just kind of spoken to one another that we don't know about. So Nick is to find out about this case and is to now go on and figure out who the players are. And so we have immediately that Nick is to figure out that it must be Merriman who was to be part of this job, because of course Merriman had been let out of prison 8 months ago, and so that makes all the sense in the world that he is kind of putting this job together. So because we end up seeing like Merriman like get out of prison and eventually be picked up by some woman. And Nick is to see Merriman's rap sheet that at some point this guy was in the military, and like a lot of things were to go like so well for this guy, where Nick is just like what went wrong with you? Like what happened to you? Like like why did things just spiral the way they did? So we have Nick that is to immediately like want to just pick off one of these guys from this group, and instead of wanting to get a confession out of him right away, he just wants to go on and just kind of find out information about this crew, because he wants to use them or squeeze them one way or another. Just say like, well, hey, like if you're going to do a job, like fork a little bit of dough over to us, because if anything, you're not the bad guy here, we're the bad guys. So because Nick, after Donnie, of course, is to be done bartending from his bartender job, they go and they tase him and they pick him up after Nick is going on and consistently calling Donnie uh, this goofy name, um, or it's like a French name of sorts, weirdly. So, and heaven forbid I remember what that is. But so we go on and we have Nick who is talking to Donnie after he is to kind of slowly but surely wake up from this bed, and he had wet himself, and he is now sitting on this chair like wondering like, okay, like why do you guys have me here? And they're like, well, hey, like yeah, like we just want information about your crew. And so Donnie is to say, it's like, well, I'm just the wheelman, I don't know anything. So Donnie is to go on and tell these guys and to finally squeal and say that it seems that Merryman is the idea man, and it seems that he has to know everything well ahead of time, that he's orchestrated this whole thing in his head, and that Donnie was to have to go and be like the new recruit of this team, because he at some point was to get popped for going 178 miles an hour, and he was to get caught. And so Merriman is like, well, like I think this guy might be my wheelman, but I need to go on and personally like test things out. So Donnie used to go on and kind of do this whole like track where there's a bunch of tricks and drifts that he's doing, where Donnie's telling Merriman, "You better put your seatbelt on." And so when Merriman does, he's like, "You know what? Like I think we found our wheelman." So they go on and they take this story and they buy it, as Donnie used to say that he was to get pulled in by Rhodes. And so we go on and have Nick just going like, well, okay, well, like eventually you're going to go on and like keep in contact with us, and eventually they're going to work something out, which they never really do. And so at some point Donnie is eventually going to have to tell Murray Men about this, because at some point Nick is to re-meet up with Donnie at this restaurant, just be like, well, hey, like, yeah, like you and me, we used to, like, we were at this gym together, and oh, hey, yeah, like, I know you guys too, like, you went to college, right? You went to college in this state, right? Like, oh, I went to the opposite. We used to, like, beat you guys all the time. Like, I guess we're technically beating you even now. So the guys get fairly offended, and Nick is like, oh, okay, well, hey, I'm just gonna leave. I'm just gonna go. But hey, like, nice seeing you, Donnie. We'll see you soon at the gym, kind of thing. So Nick walks off. So, but before that, Nick, after getting all this intel from Donnie, he is to go home the next day, and Debbie is like, Nick, where have you been? Like, you've been working? Like, sure you have. Because Nick all of a sudden is to have his wife break it down to him that she is done. Because Debbie is to have gotten a text from Nick that was him accidentally texting her some other woman's like text, obviously, saying that this girl was like a bad girl and like last night was hot. And Nick is like, well, I'm sorry, because Nick was going on and deleting old text, and Debbie was like, why are you deleting old text? Like, is there something you need to hide from me? And Nick is like, oh no, like I don't understand this phone. I don't understand this device. And Debbie's like, sure you don't, because obviously you made a mistake last night and you texted me another girl's text, obviously. So, like, what was so hot about last night? So, Debbie is to take her kids and is to take all her stuff and take it all to this aunt's place. And Debbie is telling her kids a lie that Nick is doing some construction with the house and they can't be there. And Nick doesn't have time for his kids. And Nick is like, "Oh, that's great. Like, thanks for just throwing me under the bus." So Nick is like trying to say goodbye to his kids because he'll barely see them for the rest of this film. Like, he'll have to personally go to uh, his daughter's school to just like see her while she's doing recess, just so he can see her. So Nick is to be like very heartbroken, and like we immediately have, after Nick is to like start to put it together who the whole Merryman crew is and everything like that. He is to get served with divorce papers, and we have a bunch of his like people in his unit who are going on and saying like, well, hey man, like you're divorced, welcome to the club. So Nick is to eventually, like I said, he's to get ticked off at Donnie for not giving him any information. So like he meets him at this restaurant. It's like, hey, yeah, I know you from the gym. So we have that already said and played out, and so we have Merriman who has this lavish plan about them stealing from the Federal Reserve. And he is to concoct this whole plan with the armored car and is to then go on and instead of like going right into the front of the building and to try to like figure out a way to like shoot and whatever through their way of getting through all this, instead they're going to go through the back way. And so we have it to where Donnie is to change jobs to, instead of being this bartender at this bar, he's instead working at this Chinese food joint. And so Donnie is to be consistently getting these orders that are from these women inside this building for the Federal Reserve. And so he goes on and is to fill out all this paperwork and get these visiting passes, and then is to turn around and give these people these food inside this place. I'm like, what if like they weren't even inside that building? Wouldn't that like nix the whole like this guy having to jump through all these hoops for all of this? But not only that, Donnie goes into the bathroom after delivering these women food to put these bags inside this part of this like ceiling in this bathroom, and is to kind of hide these bags there. So I'm thinking, I'm like, well, what were the bags about? But eventually the bags come into play here. So, but Merriman was to concoct this whole plan that the Federal Reserve is to have so many marked bills that if anyone was to try to steal those, somebody would be able to trace them and track them down. But Merriman is to also mention that there is another portion of money that isn't marked that they end up just shredding all the time, and it's possibly 300 million worth of money that they're shredding. And so they're like, well, yeah, we're gonna steal those, we're gonna steal that. Ensign is to chime in and say, like, that's what we're stealing, right? And Merriman is like, yep, that's exactly what we're trying to steal. So they go on and they concoct this whole plan. And so in between Ensign getting this whole like time where Ensign's daughter is going on to this prom or this dance, and this guy comes in and he's like, hey, like, I'm dating your daughter. And Ensign's like, yeah, let me have a conversation with this guy. And he takes him into this garage full of all these men. And Ensign's like, well, yeah, like, you know what? I would normally be protecting my daughter, but it seems like I have to hand it over to you to protect my daughter. So, like, if you see all these men in here, like, yeah, just like go on it. Like he's playing like the cliche-ish dad, where it's like, well, why isn't he like cleaning his gun, or why isn't he going on and like sharpening up his swords or his daggers? Because like that's always like the cliche-ish thing to do. But I also just thoroughly like had fun with this scene also. So. And then all the guys were just having this like jokingly fun moment or whatever. So, so yeah, so like this kid is like, okay, 11:30, I'll be back. So that's over. We cover that now. So, and hopefully, like most of this movie seems to be covered at this point, because there's a lot to just digest in one fell swoop of a thing. Let me know in the comments below if there's something that I forgot about, because I'm sure there probably is. So, with that said, the next big thing that comes into play here is to, of course, be that we have Merriman and his guys who are to go to this bank, this Pisco bank, and so they go into this bank and they have all these like these skeleton masks on, and they're going in there, and we have it to where Nick has been like following these guys, and they're waiting them out because as soon as they like leave to finish this crime, that's when Nick and all the guys are going to bust them. But it seems that they're not leaving yet. And they're like, okay, what's going on with this group? Like, this is not like them. Like, they're very quick and very efficient. What's going on here? So, all of a sudden, Merriman is to have everybody go on and be zip tied and be bagged and all these things. And so we have Merriman who is to grab this bank manager and is to have him call the police because I'm assuming there's going to eventually be a negotiator eventually coming the longer that they sit here. So Merriman is telling this bank manager to call the police personally and tell them that there's a 211 in progress and that Merriman is to want $10 million and a chopper being put here. And I'm like, what the? Who do you think you are? Like, do you think that you're freaking like the guys from Die Hard? Like, do you want the Asian dorm to be released? Who is the Asian dorm? I don't know. I saw them in 60 Minutes. So, so we go on and we have Merriman who is just kind of waiting for things to play out, and Nick is to all of a sudden see all of these cops make their way here, and Nick is like, no, like, we've covered that, we're covering this, like we're just waiting for these guys to go on. And like, so like Nick and all of his men are like trying to fan all these police officers away because they're like, hey, we're doing this is our job. And they're like, dude, like they've already called, like we can't just go on and not do anything. And so they have a negotiator that ends up calling, and like Merriman has already made a list of demands that they are going to kill an hostage if they do something that is not within that list of demands. And so because the negotiator doesn't go on and do what they want at one point, we have I think Bosco who takes one of the women and is to shoot her into this bathroom, and we're like, is this going to be like the negotiator moment where we're thinking that someone's going to get killed and then come to find out they're not going to be? And surefire enough, that's exactly what happens. Like they were just playing this for effect. So we have the bank manager that is now telling like, hey, like do exactly what they want or someone else is going to die here. And so like these guys will no longer want to talk to the negotiator, and so stop calling us. So all of a sudden we have this big explosion that happens in this bank, and the guys are immediately thinking, oh, they just went on and they just blew the vault. But instead, like these guys had gotten all the money they needed and then turned around and was to blow a hole in the building, because they ended up finding out in this building that this building had a sewer system. And so these guys crawled out of the sewer system to make their way to this vehicle to scramble out of here. And so Nick is like, okay, like maybe there's something else going on here. And so Nick goes right into the building and is to see that there's no bad guys there. So he just continues with this crowbar and this gun to just make it through this building, to realize that there's a big hole in this ground. And he's like, oh crap, they figure out a way around. And I was like, oh my god, this is so smart. So they're in this sewer system and they're trying to track down exactly where this leads to. And they're like, oh my god, like they escaped. So now we have it to where, since these guys have no clue where these guys are now we have it to where they have the Federal Reserve Plan. So these guys are getting paperwork in this repainted armored car to say that they're from the bank that they just robbed. And so they have all these truck sheets, and so they're making this drop, and so we have these guys that are just kind of double checking these guys' identifications, and they can immediately tell that these guys are new, and so we have these guys going through all this security, and they're going into this one room where they stashed that 100 or that $300 million. And so come to find out, Donnie, who is in his work clothes from the Chinese restaurant, is in one of these uh, boxes that they're wheeling out with all this money. And so we have it where there's a EMP glitch that is to like have Bosco turn off the power, and is to also have them like do some like EMP stuff. So where it kind of messes with the camera. So Donnie is going on and taking this 300 million, and he is putting it within all of these bags to have all these bags just be dumped into this trash chute, and then is to go on and get into this ventilation shaft where he then is to have him make his way all the way back into this bathroom where he then is to get this bag of food that he already has saved to give to these two women that of course have ordered once before, is now to order the same meal. And these women are like, man, like this order is taking a long time. And we have it, of course, where Mac, who is to be kind of the guy who is behind the scenes, just kind of like asking what he should do. Like he's kind of like the tech guy, kind of figuring out things. So we go on, and we have Donnie that delivers the food, and the girls are eating this food, and they're like, man, like this food doesn't taste all that good. And so Donnie is to make his way out of the building, and they're like, well, hey, it's that Chinese food guy. And so the guard is saying to Donnie, it's like, well, wait a minute, like you haven't signed in. Like there's obviously no paperwork saying that. And Donnie's like, well, like the other guy let me in. Like I'm sorry, like there was a shift change and this and that. And so this guy is like, okay, like I'll buy your story, but like get out of here. So Donnie is leaving, and all of a sudden the woman is to call the head desk and saying like, hey, that if that Chinese guy is still up there, like you should probably hold on to him. And so by the time that this guy is completely out of the building, it's too late. So now Nick is trying to track these guys down and figure out exactly where they're going. And so Nick is just trying to go on and just find anybody. And so the first thing that he ends up finding is actually Donnie, who's in his restaurant like outfit, and so he grabs him and is cuffing him into this car. So eventually we have the armored car guys that are to go on and no longer need like any of this. Like they don't need the armored car, they don't need any of these clothes. They're like switching into their regular street clothes to just go and get their money. So they're all in this SUV making their way like out. Just like, man, I think we're good. I think we're gonna go on and just make it out of here. And so all of a sudden, Nick is to track down exactly where the rest of the guys are in this SUV, while there's this traffic jam going on because like there's a lot of construction and like there's a merging of lanes. And so Nick, of course, is saying like, well, like since like these guys are down there, we just have to go right now. Like we have to go after them right now, or we're not going to get to them. So Merriman is to start to notice that they recognize this car from a number of rows back, and they start to realize that these guys are getting out of this car. So like, oh my god, we have to get out of this car also, and so we have to put our vests on, and we have to get ready to just start like shooting these guys up. So now here's a firefight right in the street, and like none of these cars are moving all that much. So we have it to where Nick is telling certain people in these vehicles to get down, and so they're having this firefight. It seems that a couple of Nick's men either gets killed or gets shot in the leg. So we go on and we have Ensign, who's 50 Cent, who ends up getting shot and he ends up getting killed here. We also have Bosco, who ends up getting hit, and then he ends up getting hit to where he's killed, and then he falls over and he dies. So it's really just the chase for Merriman, as Donnie is to already be like still in this car. So Merriman, and it's really just left to both Merriman and both Nick to have this chase. So and we have Merriman who's telling Nick that he's not going back, that he's not going to get cuffed, because Merriman was to call Nick while they were at that bank, because Merriman was to get Nick's number from that hooker from before. And so like Nick is like, oh, you got the number from that girl, and he's like, yeah, I got that number from her. So we have this chase going on, and like we have these guys just kind of popping shots like right around this like construction place. And so we have at one point where like these guys are jumping fences, and so it just gets to the point where like they are to have this like cars a part of one another, and we finally have it to where Merriman is to lose all of his ammo. Like he has no longer a bullet left to him. And so Merriman is to realize, like, well, since I don't have any more bullets, like I'm just gonna have Nick shoot me, because I'm not gonna go back. Because technically Merriman has already been shot, and so he's like, well, I'm probably gonna die anyway, so I might as well just go on and have Nick kill me. So Nick shoots Merriman. He goes down. And he's like, well, I told you I wasn't gonna get cuffed. And Nick is like, yeah, like, yeah, I caught you. Like, oh, that's too bad. So after all this, we have Nick, who makes it all the way back to his car to see Donnie, and Donnie is no longer cuffed in this vehicle, and he was to go on and escape. And so Nick is to now go back to this bar where Donnie was supposedly bartending, and Nick is to go on and ask this one guy. It's like, well, hey, does Donnie like bartend here anymore? And the guy's like, dude, this guy hasn't been bartending in like 2 days. Like he quit. So Nick all of a sudden is looking at all these pictures all over this bar, and he's to realize that there's a whole picture of every single one of these guys, like Merriman and Donnie and Ensign and all these guys, Bosco, Rhodes, all these guys. They, of course, were all on this soccer team together, so they really knew one another very well. Even to the point where they knew Mac from this soccer team also. So come to find out, the real truth of it is that Donnie was giving this guy a story that wasn't true. Donnie was to give Merriman all of this information about all of this setup to go on and do this whole thing, and that's how Merriman just knew everything right away and was have guaranteed information, because I guess Donnie was to go along with all these other guys and get so much intel that they planned all of this to a T. So, and there's a whole other team that they didn't know about that was probably working with them all along, to where we had it to where Bosco was to go on and was to get to these trash guys and try to get these bags back, and come to find out all the bags that were in the back of Merriman's car wasn't all money. It was all just these items that just didn't quite make sense. But these guys were just looking for these bags, and come to find out there was a whole plan about that. There was this whole like runaround about that, and Nick was to figure it out. Just be like, oh, so there was a payout at the end of this. Like, it just went on to have it be like there was just a smarter thing about all this. And that was like the big reveal at the end of this, where Nick is like, oh my god, like, we were looking for the wrong people the whole time. Because this is a whole runaround. And so Nick, at the end of this, was like, man, like, these guys were smart, gotta hand it to them. So yeah, like, that's just kind of how the movie just kind of like just finishes off with, all of a sudden we have, I think, Bisbing, the UFC fighter, is to make his way to this bar, and we have it to where Donnie's behind this bar, and he's kind of like much more different looking than he was before, and we have all these other guys that were in this other crew that are all just kind of having like just drinks and stuff like that, just kind of cheering to the fact that they've pulled this whole job off. Supposedly, there is a possibility that somehow they're going to make a sequel to this movie. I think there's like a supposed tossing around of that. Whoops. I think I would be interested in a sequel. Like, I think this movie is so clever and so smart that if there's somehow where they can kind of do a sequel with a different crew or something like that, just kind of like is to be put together, I think I'd be interested in that. To kind of see where these characters are to just continue to go and play out and whatever. So with that said, I think I'm just going to get out of here. Hopefully I covered most of this movie. I think I did. I try to focus on like the more like important parts, which is really just the action part of it. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about this movie, especially once you went through this whole review, if that's what you did. But yeah, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.